So, I have been racking my brain on how I want to do this. Do I want to do a spoiler review? Do I want to do a non-spoiler review and a spoiler review? Because I've got to do at least a spoilery review in order to really encompass my true feelings on this book. So I'm just going to straight up do a spoiler review. For primarily the reason of I just have a lot to get off my chest with this book. I mean, yeah. Instead of just getting all flustered and frazzled, I'm just going to get into the book. And this isn't a negative review. Like, I kind of want to put this get this out of the way. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not trying to put forward a negative review. I'm just trying to give my true thoughts on this book. I would also like to put out there that I in no way do not like Jenna Moreci, and in no way do I think that her writing is awful. This book just needs some work. So anyway, I reviewed The Savior's Champion by Jenna Moreci. And, pretty decent hardcover book. If only what was inside was as good a quality. I mean, there are some pages falling out, but I think that's because I left it in the cold. The glue got brittle. Anyway, let's continue with this. Plot. So there's this guy, Tobias. He's pretty poor. And he's got a whole bunch of just shit piling down on him. His sister's a paraplegic. There's all sorts of shit going on there. So he joins the Sovereign's Tournament in order to get this massive amount of money so they can live at least somewhat comfortably. It's at the loss of his life, and money only lasts so long, and their main breadwinner plans to die. So, I mean, it's kind of a ill thought out reason to enter, but I mean, it is a reason. It's a fairly not bad reason, so I'm not going to knock anything off for it. So yeah, he enters this tournament. He doesn't really care too much about the Savior because, well, he doesn't really know who she is. And even when she's presented herself, she's kind of a bit of an airhead. So he eventually actually falls in love with somebody else, someone who's not the Savior. And there's this whole thing going on there, and there's this whole plot twist, which I had figured out about a third of the way through the book, but that's neither here nor there. I'll get to that for the ending. And yeah, it's a competition fiction. So, I mean, I know what's going to happen. I know that the main character is going to survive. I know that the main character is going to be okay. And yes, it's the first book of, I believe she said it's going to be a trilogy, which, cool. No problem with that. But yeah, it's going to be a trilogy, so I mean, yeah, it's going to leave on a bit of a cliffhanger, but you know that he's going to survive the whole competition. You know this. And that's kind of the problem with competition fiction. You know what's going to happen. So a lot of the stakes, what's supposed to be real gripping, high-tension stakes just did not have any sort of real grip to them because you know that Tobias is going to be fine. Yeah, he might be banged up. Yeah, he might be cut up and sliced up, but you know he's going to be fine. And, I kind of would have liked to have seen a little bit, at least something different with a competition. I mean, there's so much that you can do. There's so many places that have yet to be explored in terms of competition fiction that have yet to be explored because nobody wants to do them or nobody's thought of them. And I don't know why. I think the only competition novel that I've ever read that actually kept me guessing and I didn't even call the ending for was The Running Man by Stephen King, or under the pen name Richard Bachman. So all in all, I'm gonna give plot a 4 out of 5. It's a decent plot, but it's competition fiction. You know what's gonna happen. And now we move on to character. And I'm not gonna lie, Tobias is about as interesting as a blank sheet of paper. He doesn't have a lot going for him. He's kind of dull. He's kind of boring. And I really just didn't care for him as a character. I didn't care what happened to him. I didn't care what he was doing at any given moment because he's dull. He's basically this blank slate that the reader can put themselves in. And I really just don't like that kind of character. I've never liked that kind of character. I want characters to be interesting. Do you know which characters were interesting? Literally every other character in the book. Seriously, every other character in this book was super fun and super interesting. Hell, even Flynn, the character that I didn't like, was interesting. He had something going for him. Yeah, Tobias does, but he's still boring. He's still boring as a character. And a lot of that actually has to come down to him being a bit of a Mary Sue. He's a little too good at everything that he's doing. Yeah, he fails a bunch of his tests and stuff like that, but hey, he's against people who just happen to be just that little bit better than him at things. You know, despite Tobias never having ever actually doing a lot of these things before. Never fought with a sword before? Hey, let's teach you as fast as we can because you're gonna fight the giant. He won. How? Okay, yeah, he was magic assisted, but how he won was actually kind of stupid, and I'll get to that probably in Imagination and Research. Yeah, I think I'll do that, Imagination and Research. That's going to be a long part. Same as writing. Writing is going to be a long section, so... where was I? Ah, yes, Tobias being a Mary Sue. There was one point where he's supposed to use a bow and arrow, and yeah, okay, okay. He was so good with this bow and arrow, never having even picked one up before in his life. He's managing to shoot down wolves, single shot kill, without ever having used a bow before. Okay, and you know the one character is going, "It's beginner's luck. You're fine." No, that's not how beginner's luck works. Beginner's luck, yeah, 1 or 2 shots will be fairly decent, but after that, you kind of really lose it, because you don't know what you're doing. If beginner's luck were an actual thing, or an actual, at least credible thing, it would be something that's utilized way more in a lot of different fictions, and actually in real life as well. So, yeah. And even in the final battle, him using his sword, stuff like that. Oh, man. I finally actually got the style of fight and the way the writing should have been throughout the book. Like the way the character should have interacted throughout the book. But I got it in the last chapter, or during the final fight, so I'll take it. I'll get into that in just a little bit. Yeah. Tobias... Mary Sue, super boring, did not care for him, did not like him. I would have really preferred if the book was centered around any of the other characters, or if any of the other characters would have had even POV moments. I mean, that alone would have saved this book a lot for me. So for character, I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. Like, it was saved by the interesting other characters, but yeah, Tobias being super boring. And even Leela being... she's almost unbearable to read. I mean, there was a lot of points where she was actually really, really nice and really super, and I was really cool. I really liked seeing her on the page, but after a while, it's like, oh my god, woman. How thick are both those characters, really? I mean... Tobias is about as dumb as they get, and Layla is about as stubborn as they get, so I have no idea how a romance even came about with those two. The romance was actually not too bad. I'll get to that in writing, but yeah. So yeah, character, 3 out of 5. Not a great score, but like I said, it was saved by every other character actually being really, really interesting. Imagination and Research. She did a really good job in the imagination aspect, and some of the research. Like, she kind of knew what she was doing, for the most part. She just doesn't seem to understand how competition works. Especially competition with such high stakes as life and death. Characters like the giant, the dragon, and the shepherd should not have survived past the labyrinth, because the weaker characters would have banded together and picked them off. I mean, shit, even the bear shouldn't have when he was shown when he was shown that he could actually just not feel pain. He shouldn't have survived. He shouldn't have gone very far into the game because that's how competitions work, especially with a life and death competition. It's not the strong people who survive, and it's not the weak people who survive. It's the people somewhere in the middle. Because the weak people see the strong people, and the middle people see the strong people. These strong people are threats. We gotta take these guys out so we don't have to worry about them. Once these strong guys are gone, then they can start picking off the weak people. That's kind of how these things work. And that goes doubly so for life and death. And I was going to mention this like in writing, but I actually think imagination and research goes better with this, and that's the world building. She really kind of only pushed the world building just a little bit. Like, we got a little bit of a taste as to what this world is and how people are and who people are. Like, you can tell that people are okay with other ethnicities. You can tell people are okay with other sexualities. You can tell people are okay with other genders. Like, there doesn't seem to be any sort of real sexism, racism, classism. Well, classism, it is a feudal society. Can never mind classism. But yeah, there's anything like that. And, that's fine. It's a fantasy world. It's whatever. But that's actually not the part of the world building that I had problem with. I don't know how this magic system works, because it almost seems like she's making it up as she goes. And especially with fantasy. Magic is something that you really gotta know what you're doing with. Otherwise, it either feels tacked on, forced, or just lazy. And the magic just seemed kind of lazy. Like, the Savior has magic. Okay. Is she the source of this magic? Because if she was the source of the magic, then cool, we can work from that. But the dragon has these tattoos that are protection spells, and from the people who know what magic is, accept that these protection spells are the real deal. Like, these work. So how does that magic work? I mean, I don't need a comprehensive list as to how every piece of magic and every facet of the magic works. I just need something. Because without something, you really don't have much of anything. You just have this thing, and you don't know what you're doing with it. And Jenna really doesn't seem to know what she's doing with the magic. She writes it very, very well. It's very descriptive as to what it is and what's going on. But how does it work? Where does it come from? The Savior having this magic, and that's another thing, the succession line, because the Savior is the Savior's mother would have been alive had she not been assassinated, and that's a whole other aspect of bullshittery that I'm assuming is going to get more into in books 2 and 3. But yeah, that's a whole other thing. So, had the Savior not died, she would have been alive for the Sovereign's tournament. How does this whole thing work then? Because the person who wins the tournament is now the Sovereign. Okay, where does this go now? So now you have 2 Saviors. Where does this go? If I have questions about the little innocuous world building things, and I'm not even splitting hairs, I'm honestly, these are things I'm genuinely curious about, and if I'm curious about it, especially in terms of a fantasy setting, there's going to be way more people who are way more curious about this than I am. So I just needed more with the world building. In terms of research, other than competition and stuff like that, it seemed fairly legit, actually. I had no real problems with her use of weaponry, her use of the traps and stuff like that. All that was fine. I really had no problem with any of that. Hell, even how she pictured Thesson and the other characters and the other kingdoms. Yeah, okay, that's all fine. So for imagination research, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5, just because what she did right, she did really, really right. But what she did wrong, yeah, she didn't do so great at. And actually, because a lot of this actually ties into the writing as well, Jenna's writing is really, really good. Like, she gives writing advice, and it shows. Like, she is a very, very good writer. She is the sort of person who I can read her books, know what's going on, and even if I'm just kind of sort of half-ass reading it, I still know what's going on. And that's a serious plus in my book. In my opinion, that is a serious plus. I don't want to have to continually really focus and pay attention because I got other shit going on around me too. At all sorts of times. Hell, I got a dog who always wants attention. I don't have kids, thank fuck. I wouldn't have any time to read. Especially with writing on top of that. But yeah, I would not have any time to do really anything. But I have work, I read at work sometimes, especially during my lunch break, and people like to natter at me, so... The sake that Jenna's book is easily read to the point where I can kind of pay attention to the book and to other people at the same time. Seriously, great part in her. Seriously great on her part. But the other stuff, the world building, all that, which I touched on the other one, which I probably should have actually talked about here, other than in imagination and research. Yeah. So because of the stuff that I should have mentioned in this category instead of the last one, but chose to do in the last category, these numbers are going to seem a little off. It actually should be the other way around. Writing should actually be 4, and imagination and research should be 3. But yeah, they're almost interchangeable for the gripes that I have. So yeah, it's one of them is 4, one of them is 3. You can kind of interchange them depending on where you want to put these gripes. And the ending. Oh, the ending. Why? So, as I said, I had this twist ending figured out really quick, really early on in the book, because I actually thought about the book longer than a few minutes. Like, it's very, very obvious that Layla is the savior. How is this obvious? Well, it's a competition, and whoever wins is supposed to have the savior. And the savior would not take kindly to someone being in love with somebody else. The other person is supposed to die anyway, so it's kind of... It all just kind of culminates into all this. And there's all these hints throughout the way. There's all this other shit throughout the way. And you'd think Tobias would have figured it out. Like, he's with this woman all the fucking time. He's almost with this... Like, he's around her father for the last half of the tournament all the fucking time. Like, you would have thought he'd have figured this out, but he didn't because he's denser than a fucking sheet of lead. Seriously, I did not like Tobias. He was really unbearable to read for the majority of the book. But anyway... So yeah, there's the whole twist ending there. There's Tobias being spontaneously amazing with not just one sword, but 2 swords now. Yay! More bullshit that I hated. But, and I was really willing to give this ending a 1 out of 5. Like, I was so pissed. Like... What would have saved it more for me is if the Sovereign would have actually been not a bad guy. Just, he saw what Tobias is capable of. He saw that Tobias is favored by the Savior, and as such decided to put some extra focus on Tobias and really test his mettle. And honestly, I would have loved that ending. It would have really explained a lot. I mean, it wouldn't have explained the assassin, but I mean, it's a part of a series, or at least a trilogy, so I mean... That could have come out later, but no, the evil Dick Lord is still the evil Dick Lord, and the 3 bad guys throughout the tournament are the 3 bad guys who were hired by him, and oh my god, like, I hated that. I hated it so much. It wasn't until that last chapter that saved it. At least enough of it. It really did. It saved just enough of it. When Layla reveals herself to Tobias as the savior, he flips his shit. Like, he straight up is... He's pissed off, he's confused, he's angry, he's like, why the fuck didn't you say anything? And Layla gives this bullshit excuse. And, well, you kept saying things like, I hate the Savior, fuck the Savior, I don't want anything to do with the Savior. And it's like, lady, it's not that hard to figure it out on how to test this guy on being like, hey, what if, you could have been like, well, what if I'm the savior? What would you say then? And then he like, well, if you were the savior, that'd be a totally different thing. And, she could have worked him up to that. Instead of just, yeah, I'm Layla, I'm a part of the court, this is the savior, blah, 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 and until, like, the very, very end. Like, seriously, she was really, really hard to read during the last bit of the book, because I even screamed at the book, oh my god, woman, just fucking tell him. I seriously did. I'm glad nobody was around when I did that. But, yeah. Tobias actually flipping his shit, and, them actually thinking things through for once in the book. Being like, okay, how do we get out of the castle? How do we deal with this? How do we go forward with this? All in the last chapter, it actually kind of saved the ending, and actually kind of saved the book a little bit for me. Not enough to actually give it a half-decent score. Not enough to even give it really a good score in my book. Like, the ending, it's a 3 out of 5. And trust me, I really wanted to give it a 2. I really did. But that last chapter really, really did a number for saving it. So I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. Giving this book a full total of 6 out of 10. Not a great score. I'm a little harsher on this one because I actually spent money on this. I bought this one. This was not asked... I was not asked to do a review of it, but Jenna is an indie author, which as such works in terms of indie book review. It's one that I've been wanting to read for a while now. It's one that I've been really curious about, and since I've been following Jenna Moreci for at least 2-3 years now, I really had some higher expectations. Like, I hadn't read Eve because it's a YA novel. I don't read YA. I don't find it interesting. I don't find the characters in YA to be anything even close to compelling. So YA is just not my genre. And that's fine. But a dark fantasy, that should have really been something that I loved. It should have been something that really stood out to me, but there was just too many glaring stuff. As I said, the main character is dull. The magic system is not there. The world building is not even really there. Like, there's just nothing to hold on to. You just have this character and these characters, and you're just supposed to accept it and go on from there. Like, there's so many questions that I have for this book that I can't even fit into this because this review is actually getting really fucking long now, and I really want to bring this to a close. So, Savior's Champion, did not care for it. Will I read the second one? Yes, probably, because, well, there's always a chance of there being more added to the world. There's more added to everything else. So I'm giving the second one a chance. If I don't like the second one, I am not going to read the third one. I will review the second one, whether Jenna asks me to or not, because, I can. But anyway, tune in next time. This is Indie Book Review. If you like what I do, watch more of them. That's really all I've got to say about that.